Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, Priya. Let's dive in. In my more recent episodes, we've been exploring why people don't listen. You're trying to speak up, and no matter what the situation, they're just not listening, whether it's at the tire shop, the doctor's office, or even in close relationships. And I'm talking about intimate and friendships, work environment, any relationship. We also talked about how to advocate for yourself so that your voice is heard, because that's what it's all about as we're stepping into this second act of life. If you're in perimenopause, postmenopause, and you're craving this change, you've got this bubbling up within you that you're just like, I can't keep quiet anymore. This is why this is so important. Today, I kind of want to flip the perspective, change it around a little bit. We've been talking a lot about being heard, but what about how we listen? Listening is actually one of the most powerful ways to reclaim your voice and strengthen your relationships and any kind of relationship. So often we've been conditioned to think that speaking louder or more forcefully is the only way to be heard. Now, how many times has that happened where you're trying to share something with someone and they're not listening? So you start to speak, you start to take it up a level, and you start to raise your voice, or you start to be more forceful, or you even say, what I've said in the other episodes, are you freaking listening to me? On the contrary, when you're speaking and someone isn't listening, they might even take it up a notch. They might start shouting, and they might start responding to you in a forceful way. But here's the secret. Listening, truly listening, creates a space where people naturally start to listen back. The problem is that not all listening is the same. Most of us were never taught the difference between just hearing words and receiving someone. And when we don't understand these differences, we end up stuck in frustrating conversations that literally go nowhere. Now, I might be a communication coach, spent 20 plus years helping others to find their voice as a speech and language pathologist. But did I have good communication skills? Absolutely not. Was I always a good listener? Definitely not. If somebody was talking to me and was sharing about their trip to Japan, I immediately was listening to how I can respond about my trip to Japan, about my experience in Japan. I don't want to say it was a one-upmanship, but in retrospect, it could have been perceived as that. Like, you're telling me something, so I'm going to tell you even something better. And even just as far as listening, sometimes I would find myself just not paying attention. So at the end of the conversation, they're saying, so what do you think? And I'm left with, oh, shoot, I stopped listening to you about 5 minutes ago, and now you're asking me for my thoughts, and now I have to rewind and figure out a way to tell you that I wasn't paying attention. So listening with deeply, and receiving someone, it's a skill. And like I said, these are all muscles that need to be built. It's nothing that all of a sudden you're born into this world, you start communicating, and you're an expert in this. No. It's something that you learn along the ways, and as a woman in midlife, it's something that really starts to show its face, because you're not tolerating mediocre relationships anymore. You're not tolerating substandard communication. You're not tolerating one-way communication. So I came across this powerful framework. I got this from another organization that is my mentor, and this framework comes from David Rome in his article, Deep Listening, and it describes 3 levels of listening. So as I describe these 3 levels, I want you to ask yourself, which one of these do you relate to? It could be one of them. It could be all 3 of them. There's the underdeveloped listener, there's good listeners, and then there's deep listeners. And let's walk through each one, and I'll share some real life examples of what they look like and how you can move towards deep listening in your own life. So, underdeveloped listeners. I've been an underdeveloped listener in my life before. I still am underdeveloped at times, depending on the situation, depending on what may be going on in my life, how much I'm taking on, if I'm stressed, Who knows what it could be? But let's talk about the underdeveloped listener. So, the definition of an underdeveloped listener is that you're listening with bias. You're filtering everything that somebody is saying to you through, how does this affect me? Or what can I say next? As I was describing to you with my example about Japan, you're listening to respond. You're not just listening. So some of the behaviors that go with an underdeveloped listening, interrupting. We've heard that before. We've done that before. Downloading facts, debating, correcting, and even dismissing. And I will fess up that I've been a very bad corrector, especially around grammar, especially if somebody said something this wrong way. I was repeating it back to them as essentially it was my speech therapy training, and I was doing it to them. Oh, you meant to say this? And that correcting was extremely destructive. The other person felt like they were being judged. They felt like I was putting them down, and I was being an underdeveloped listener. Another example of this is if, let's say, a coworker cuts you off to say, well, actually, this is how I see it. Or you're in the middle of a sentence and they're cutting you off to tell you their opinion. Or we've had this before, the friend who constantly shifts the conversation back to their problems. How many times have you gone to somebody to say, oh my gosh, this is going on in my life? Next thing you know, you're not talking about yourself and the problem that you were facing. You're talking about what that other person is going through. This is chronic, and I can give so many examples of this. When I was with the partner that I often reference in my episodes, if I had some kind of physical pain, an injury, whether it was from weightlifting or whether it was from some sports or some whatever the injury was, and I would talk about that physical pain because it was hurting, and I'd say, oh man, my shoulder hurts, my knee hurts, I was running so much. Next thing you know, we're not talking about my knee anymore. We were talking about that person's shoulder over and over and over and over again because they had had a shoulder replacement surgery. And then I started to notice this in other conversations when I was with this person, even with other people. So I didn't need to take it personally. Even with other people, when they would talk about the physical injuries or the physical ailments that they were going through, all of a sudden we were talking about this person's shoulder replacement again. This person was clearly an underdeveloped listener, and I don't think had any capacity for good listening or deep listening. It was just always about, it's going to be all about me. It's going to be all about me. And that goes into narcissism, which is another episode. So the impact that this has when you're having a conversation with an underdeveloped listener, conversations feel draining. Now, how many times have you had that kind of conversation? You're just like, oh God, I just want this to be done. Let's just stop. Or you just change the topic altogether. They're invalidating because you're sharing, you're being vulnerable, you're trying to, share from your perspective. And you're feeling safe with this person in order to share, but yet they're invalidating you. And as I said before, major impact of this is it can feel one-sided and actually end relationships, especially if that underdeveloped listener does not have the capacity to hear what you're trying to say, and it's chronic. So a tip that I want you to take away from this and talking about the underdeveloped listener is notice when you're preparing your response instead of receiving the other person's words. Pause, breathe, let them finish. Also, notice when you're sharing with someone. Do you see their wheels turning? Are they looking up to the language center of their brain thinking, okay, how am I going to respond to this? Are they receiving your words? And that's an even more powerful statement that you can say to somebody. Are you receiving my words? Are you hearing what I have to say? It's okay to ask those questions. It's okay to call somebody on this stuff, especially if you don't feel like you're being heard. Notice if they are pausing. Notice if they are breathing. Notice if they are letting you finish or they're interrupting you. Notice what kind of signals they're giving to you that they're listening. They might not be. As an underdeveloped listener, they might be looking away. They might be looking at their watch. They might be thinking about, waving to this person, waving to that person. dropping eye contact, deflecting. You go in to talk about something, and next thing you know, you're talking about something completely unrelated, and you're wondering, how did I get here? So pause, breathe, and let the other person finish. And also give yourself that right too. You can tell somebody, I need you to pause for a second. I need you to let me finish. And that's a good way to handle this situation. Now let's talk a little bit about good listeners, okay? So good listeners give open-minded attention. They're looking for surface meaning, and where the person's coming from. So they're listening. They're listening. It's just surface level. They're not really listening to your tone and all of the things that you're saying, but they're listening to the surface of what you're actually saying, and they want to know where you're coming from. So some of the behaviors that I described that the underdeveloped listener will not do is nodding, and saying, maybe asking clarifying questions. Oh, so you went out afterwards? Or, oh, wait, so you told them no? They might show interest and you'll see that in their reaction, being like, wow, I can't believe that happened to you. Oh my gosh, that happened. And you'll get that kind of validation. An example of this is a manager who might say, well, tell me more about what you need here, instead of jumping in with solutions. Or, I noticed that you're having this week you've been really quiet. What do you need? Instead of jumping in with solutions, instead of trying to fix everything. They're looking for solutions with you. And they're looking for that communication with you. And with a good listener, people feel heard and validated. Think about how amazing that is, to just feel heard and validated. And when you are heard and validated, when you are seen, and when you're being listened to, that opens the door to more honesty. You can remember the people that you've spoken to that you knew were good listeners and you wanted to go back to them, right? Can you also remember the people that were underdeveloped listeners and you're just saying, I will never go back to you. I don't care, hell or high water, I will never share anything with you ever again. Because you will feel validated and seen and heard. How amazing is that you can be more honest with someone? Life is short and it's about relationships. It's about giving and receiving love. And if you can open the door to more honesty, that just allows for that to happen. So I want you to think about this as you're being a good listener. And as somebody's being a good listener with you, you're going to ask what's important to you about this. So a takeaway tip here, just practice curiosity. Look at things with curiosity. There's a place to, just go straight to the horse and blunt and as direct as you can be because you need to address something. But then other things where you're feeling reactive or you're assuming, practice curiosity. When that person is speaking to you or you're speaking to someone, wouldn't it be amazing to be asked, what's important to you about this? Or tell me more. I want to know why you felt this way. Being curious goes a long way. It helps you, it helps the listener from jumping to conclusions, from reacting, and it allows us to really step into a place of response communication where you're listening and just responding. And that's more reciprocal. The last type of listener that I would like to talk about are deep listeners. So deep listeners, they listen from a caring, receptive place, deep within their heart. And they, deep listeners suspend their own judgments to connect with the deeper meaning behind the words. It almost looks like when you're talking with a deep listener, they are looking through your soul. They might just be staring at you and you're thinking, what, do I have something on my face? But they're just listening to you so deeply. You could have a deep listener on the other side of the phone and you think they're not listening because it's so quiet. That's a deep listener. They're just listening to you and they're waiting to see what more you have to say. And they're suspending their judgments. So the behavior of a deep listener is deep empathy. Deep empathy, reflecting back feelings to you. They definitely create a safe space and they are listening for the unsaid. So you might infer things, but you're not even saying them directly. And the deep listener will say, well, yeah, and that's why this, and this. And all of a sudden you feel free because that person has just said out loud what you felt inside. And you just didn't have words for it. That is the power of a deep listener. So when you are offering someone deep listening, think about how you're making them feel. And when somebody's offering you deep listening, think about how you feel. To feel safe with somebody, that's safe. That somebody can just really read into your words and come up with an analysis that you didn't even think about. I remember when I was first going to therapy years ago, when I discovered what therapy was, and I didn't know why I was going to therapy. It just was offered at my university. It said free psychotherapy for South Asian women. I was like, sure, I'll go to that. And I started going. At the time I was in a relationship, and that relationship ended. And of course, my therapist was a deep, deep listener. She was reflecting back the feelings. They're trained to do this. I felt safe with her. And that relationship, as I was saying, when it ended, there was a lot of trauma there. There was so much that was happening. And I was just sharing incident by incident by incident by incident. I couldn't put the whole picture together. I didn't see the panorama. But the therapist could see the entire picture. And I remember saying something because I didn't know how to make sense of it. And what she said was, well, it sounds like this is a case of vicarious traumatization. And she named it, and that was when I started to feel free. That's when I started to heal, because I didn't say that. I was just giving her instances of all the different things that had happened, and she was listening for the unsaid. And when she listened to my words, she was able to come up with something that really led me on this path to heal, my healing journey. I can't say that that helped me with getting into those kind of relationships, because I continued, and that's part of my journey, which I talk more about on this channel. But the fact that the therapist was able to listen for the unsaid and speak it back to me, reflect back to me in a way that would set me free, it's priceless. So another example of this is a friend who says, I hear you're angry, but underneath that I sense that you're really hurt. How amazing is that? When you're just talking and talking and talking, and your friend just says, I know you're angry, but underneath that, I see something else. I have an amazing friend who calls it swamping. She's like, do you want to swamp? Because I hear that there's something under there, what you're saying right now, that you just kind of have to get rid of. This type of listening builds trust. It builds intimacy, and it builds healing. And think about the amazing relationships that you can have when you have deep listening. Friendships, work relationships, intimate relationships. Now, my pattern in my life, it has been getting into intimate relationships with underdeveloped listeners. So that has led me to this place of frustration, anger, resentment. But as I step into this journey, as I step into midlife and find my voice, I am attracting more and more people, friends, who are just deep listeners, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful because they are lifelong friends. I trust them. Our dynamic allows us to heal each other. So the next time that you are engaging in deep listening with someone, you can try reflecting, what I hear is, or it sounds like what matters most to you is. Really listen deeply to what that other person is saying, so you can pull out something that could feel like $1 million to them. And also, I want you to listen to when somebody's being, or pay attention to when somebody's being a deep listener to you. What are they pulling out from you? What are they setting you free from? As like my example, what are they validating within you? So here's the invitation. Think about your own listening. Are you stuck in underdeveloped listening? Now, I believe that we move through all three. I'm not yet. I would say that a lot of the time I am a really deep listener, but there are times where I'm just a good listener. And there are times where I'm an underdeveloped listener, especially when I'm doing something, I'm distracted, I'm on the phone with my mom, and she's like, did you hear me? Are you doing something? definitely an underdeveloped listener, and she calls me on it. So, like I said, we go through all three, but where do you want to hang out? So, question again, are you stuck in underdeveloped listening? Because there are people who are, well, instead of moving around, they stay underdeveloped. They're making that choice. They don't have the skills to move beyond that. Are you just waiting your turn to respond? Or if you're in a conversation, are you noticing that that other person is just waiting to respond? They can't wait for you to be done. They're taking the reins. You're talking about something, and now all of a sudden you're talking about their thing. Are you practicing good listening, showing interest? Or are you cultivating deep listening and creating a space where someone feels seen, safe, valued, heard? And the more you practice deep listening, the more your own voice naturally strengthens. And that's what I noticed. That's the magic in this about finding your voice, is in my process of learning how to listen, to become a deep listener. I have been able to find my voice. It wasn't in the actual speaking, not always, that I found my voice. It was in the listening. When we listen deeply to others, we also teach them how to listen deeply to us. So you're modeling good behavior. Some people are not going to benefit from that modeling. They just want to stay underdeveloped for the rest of their lives, and that's okay. Ask yourself, do you still need this person in your life? Do you want this person in your life? Is this person adding value to your life? In the last 5 days, as I went through this process of listening and my dynamics, my relationship dynamics, I took out about 5 people from my phone. I was like, these are one-sided. These aren't reciprocal. I'm a deep listener to you, but you are underdeveloped, constantly taking the baton from me during conversations, and I'm just not playing that game anymore. So this is a process, and you get to play with it. Have fun with it. Be the observer when you're in conversation. Also pay attention when you're not part of the conversation, but you're watching somebody. What kind of communication are they using? What kind of listener are they? So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to share this episode with someone who you may feel will benefit from the content. Don't forget to grab my free guide, 4 Steps to Finding Your Voice in Relationships, at www.unmutewithpriya.com. Link is below. You can also apply for one-on-one coaching with me. The Google form is also in the description. Join my free school group where we get together every week and just jam and have fun. And until next time, keep listening deeply and keep finding your voice.